Yes, so I'm so happy to take part in this year's seminar, and today we'll be talking about ancestor reverence, and more specifically, why and how it's relevant to the life of the everyday modern Black person, right? So I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who is also a traditional healer. My friend is a Sangoma, which is an initiated spiritualist within the context of Ubungoma, which is uh, a, a general name for the broad spectrum of spiritual practices of Southern Africa among the Nguni people. So people who are of Zulu descent, Xhosa descent, Tswana, Sutu, etc. So the friend and I were talking about this because they'd had a recent interaction where they were engaging with someone who basically said that their ancestral traditions were old fashioned and that we live in the modern day and those things are of the past and they're irrelevant. And this person, they were Christian, and so my friend replied, "Well, if our ancestral traditions are relevant, then why is Christianity not relevant?" So there's this idea that our traditions are backwards. Oh, that's what they did back in the day. We don't have to do those things anymore. You know, Abrahamic religions are more contemporary, they're more modern, they're more sophisticated, quote unquote, right? Um, and so obviously my friend was very upset about it and brought it to me, and I was outraged and very upset. And the opportunity came for me to talk here about ancestor reverence again and why it's so important and why it's even more important for us in our contemporary times to engage with the spirits of our ancestors and to promote and engage with our spiritual technologies from these ancestral traditions and how wisdom is something that doesn't become obsolete, it doesn't expire. Especially our ancestral traditions that are alive, they adapt. Our traditions are mostly oral, they're mostly revelation based. There's a deeply personal experience and, and pathway of engaging with this information, with this body of information. And so it's not something that comes in a book, right? Our traditions don't live in books. And because they are alive and they're not in stasis, they can evolve and adapt to our current circumstances. You know, um, for the most part, the human experience is very similar across the millennia. I just recently saw an article where they found this Sumerian tablet where this kid he's studying to become a scribe, and he's writing a letter to his mother upset that he doesn't have enough clothes and how like, oh, one of his fellow students, his father works for his father, right? So the student that he's using as an example um is his father is a subordinate of the author's father, but yet he has all these nice clothes, and this is a tablet that's like 7,000 years old, right? So 7,000 years ago, or however many years ago, we have a student in school who essentially is trying to gaslight his mother into getting him the equivalent of, I don't know, a Montclair coat. So it that alone kind of struck me because it really implies that, hey, the human condition is the human condition, and we have been the way we are as people as long as we have been people. And so, our ancestral experiences are relevant across time because we're going through the same things in our individual societies. So there's not that much that's so different. Yeah. Our ancestors may not have had cell phones and Tinder and, you know, all the other stuff that we have that's specific to our time. And even that is up for debate because there's a lot of us who believe that this isn't the first time that we've reached this pinnacle of human civilization, but the fifth. That's for another talk. Um, but yeah, like we've been people and we've been peopling, right? So being able to tap into the body of knowledge and experience that encompasses what 1.4 million years between today and like Australopithecus, you know, all of that experience, all of that, um, yeah, that whole entire body of memory is something that is embedded in our DNA. So when we talk about our ancestors, we're talking about the spirits of our ancestors and their consciousness and their identities as people when they lived on earth, but we're also talking about ancestral memory, instinct, the subconscious mind, the unconscious mind, and that ocean of consciousness that lies beneath what we commonly look at as our own thoughts, right? You know, we engage at the very surface level of ourselves. Most of us are not consistently or in a constant state of tapping into the deepest part of ourselves because then that kind of makes the material world we live in less relevant to us. And we're here for a mission. So you don't get to swim in the deepest parts of the ocean all the time. Speaking of the ocean, we know what happened the last time a group of people decided to go too deep, right? They didn't make it back up. So that is another reason why we should be engaging with our ancestors because they cover us. So when we're digging deeply into ourselves, for self-discovery, for evolution, our ancestors are the guide for that. You know, just the same way as that submarine wasn't able to make it down all the way to the ocean floor because it did not have the protection and support. It wasn't built to go down that far. The same way as we cannot do everything alone. We cannot evolve, elevate, reach these higher planes of consciousness entirely alone. We're not meant to be alone, right? So, in that same vein, our ancestors are here to protect us and to elevate us, but also to streamline our path to where we're going. You know, um, I do want to talk a little bit about um, what that means in terms of individual practice. So, everyone is entitled to engage with their ancestors by default, right? You are alive, you come from somebody else, who came from somebody else, who came from somebody else. That is your point of entitlement. These are your family members all the way back, right? And because these are your family members, and because the very cells of your body are composed of the genetic information of these people, you are inseparable from them. You are literally the product of those that have come before. There's an analogy that's often used um, when when a woman is pregnant with a daughter. By month 8, the egg cells that are in that fetus have already developed. The egg cell that would eventually become the grandchild of the pregnant woman, it's already there. That link of chain, we're talking about 3 generations of people in the same body. That is what it means to be connected to one's ancestors. So, unlike other spiritual forces like divinities, for instance, or nature spirits, you don't have to get permission to engage with their ancestors. There's a lot of stuff that I'm seeing online about this or that god or goddess, this or that orisha, this or bosom, whatever deity across the board. Pick one. They're shiny. Deities are almost like celebrities in the sense, like if you had to make a comparison, right? Everybody, well, not everybody, but it's like um I heard a reference where someone said that Oshun is the Beyonce of the Orisha. And I found it to be very funny, but then I thought about like the implications of what they were saying, right? So in a sense that, there's people feel a level of entitlement to access the lives and personal lives of celebrities. They often identify with a celebrity as an extension of their own ego, so they act like this person or act like whatever has been projected to be the mask that this person is wearing. Obviously there's the hero worship, if you will, element as well. But there's not a personal developed experience with the said celebrity, right? So this person is a fan, but they're not a friend, they're not a relative. They don't have an actual genuine point of access. But all the same, they feel entitled to engage with this celebrity, right? And I see a lot of that happening with how people treat divinities as well. So what's important to understand is that all of our spiritual traditions come from cultures, right? They didn't just pop up out of nowhere, you know? Each culture is a universe within itself. Each and every single ethnic culture is a universe. If you reach back into the origins of that culture, you'll have a creation story that tells you how this culture came to be, how the first people of this culture came to be, and so on. And even that is ancestral. The creation story of a given culture is inherently ancestral. They're telling you how the first people of this culture came to be, and then how that progressed through the world. Um, but it's what I feel is lost on a lot of people is that if this is not the culture that is your ancestral culture, you are an outsider to it. And it's not bad that you are an outsider to it, that you're not born within the specific context of the culture, but it's not inherently yours, you know? I can't just fly a plane to somewhere in China and demand access to one of their prominent monasteries. But what I see online, especially, is people feeling entitled to um, access information and so on to cultural traditions that have had to be clandestine, that have had to be closed to survive through enslavement, colonization, war, for their own safety, right? At the same time, I see people completely neglecting their own ancestors, the people who have a direct connection to them, the people who are personally responsible for their well-being. Your ancestors are personally, that's their job. Their job is you, right? You know, even me as a son of Orisha Shango, my ancestors and my Ori, my head, my consciousness, have a more vested interest in my development and higher good than a deity that is responsible for thousands or millions of people all at once. So if I'm trying to accomplish a goal or make a prayer, I'm going to go to my ancestors first, right? If it's something that is above their pay grade or something that is out of the scope of what they are responsible for, then I will go to whatever universal force is most appropriate. Granted, I have divination at my disposal, but I just feel like people underestimate the power of their ancestors because it's not shiny. It's that's your grandmother, right? Not a god that is the god of the sun or the god of the water or whatever. And it's like, but this deity doesn't have a human experience. This is a deity that may very well be detached from a personal understanding of what it's like to be human and what it's like to need something, what it's like to cry, what it's like to wake up hungry, what it's like to have to heal from a wound. You know, your ancestors have a level of urgency because they also understand your limitations. You exist in the physical plane, you experience time, and as we know, time is a limited resource. My sister put it morbidly when someone was 2 hours late for something. She said, "We are all actively dying. I'm never getting this time back." Right? So, and it's true. As material beings, we are at every single moment, even now, we are actively spending our lifespan. So in that sense, I do want to express gratitude to all of you for sharing your time with me, because you could all be doing something else, right? In that vein, our ancestors understand what it's like to need rent money tomorrow. So I encourage people to start with your ancestors. That's the foundation of an African spiritual practice, your ancestors. These are the people who carried your spiritual power and you inherit it from them, right? So these are the people that you should be going to first for your human concerns. You don't have to ask for permission. You don't have to argue with people online about whether it's appropriate for you to make an offering to this deity or that deity or whatever. You go to your ancestors. And through building that connection, you strengthen your own personal power. Through engaging with your ancestors, this is how you can start to work on generational traumas. You know, this is how we collectively work on healing the wound of maafa, of being stolen. You know, I'm the first person in my family to return to the African continent. That's over 400 years that my family has been out of Africa, and I'm the first in my family to return, not the last, because me coming here opened the floodgates. So people have been coming back, and some of them have gone on to enter African spiritual traditions as well, initiate, receive chieftaincies, but it's it's been personally relevant for me to do this from an ancestral perspective, you know, and through doing this work and engaging with my ancestors, I'm also creating a new template for my future family members' progress, you know, for my nieces, my nephews, my cousins, my future children to have a stronger platform to stand on, you know? So when we are engaging with our ancestors, we're engaging with them because of the relationships that need to be healed in the past, and also because of the work that needs to be done to provide a better future for our lineage moving forward. And that's something that you are entitled to. There's very few entitlements in African spirituality. We have to work for everything. You know, we don't get, we're not entitled to initiation because we're Black. We're not entitled to initiation because we're this or we're that. We have to work for everything. You have to work for everything. Everything that I know I had to work for, whether it was, me having to do contemporary work to get the money to take this class, or whether I had to clean an entire temple before an elder decided to teach me how to do a specific spiritual work. We work for everything. We don't get it for free, because this is how we prove our worthiness for the knowledge. There are very few entitlements in African spiritualities. Talking to your own family is one of them. So, in the absence of anything else, you have a right to call up your deceased great grandmother and be like, hey, I need help here. You have a right to talk to that uncle that may have been the guy in the neighborhood that nobody messed with, right? To go handle your boss that's harassing you at work. You have a right to ask your family for help. And then at the same time, to return back to healing family traumas and ancestral traumas, you know, a lot of people will say, well, I came from a really trifling family. I don't have good people in my family. My parents were this, my grandparents were that. Or I don't know this side of my family because of this or that circumstance. How can I engage with your ancestors? You're still connected to these people by blood, you know? And even if the past 4 or 5 generations of your family have all been waste men, there's somebody before them in that link of chain that had their business together. Somebody, you know. You cannot tell me that 62 generations of people have all been useless. Somebody in the link of chain is going to stand up to you. You know, somebody. I've seen it. I've seen it. Like I've been in divination with a client, and had to identify who they were supposed to reach out to for a specific request to be met. And my ancestors were like, firstly, don't ask the father side of the family. And I was like, oh, okay. Then they were like, well, you also kind of don't want to really put it to the first few generations of like the most recent people in that family. Let's start with maybe like 600 years ago and see where we can go from there. And we eventually found the very specific ancestor who is a weaver to help my designer friend who's studying at FIT. Somebody in that link of chain was able to help. Yeah. It ain't always easy, but it's always going to be rewarding. Yeah. All right. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah. I'll go in with the first question.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. And Kaz is going to get the mic out for other people as well. So my first question
Okay.
is, how does one start to engage and look for
Mhm.
ancestor who can perhaps help with, you know, the specific issue one is having at the time?
Mhm. So that depends on a few different circumstances. So unfortunately, most of us as diasporans don't have complete knowledge of our ancestral lineages. So in many um, African tribes here on the continent, you will have uh, whether it's a praise oriki where your lineage is recited and it goes back however many 14 generations, 15 generations, all the way back to a common ancestor. We who have been stolen, you know, our genealogy often stops at the Atlantic, right? However, these consciousnesses, these memories are still in our blood. So when you are approaching your ancestors, you, you don't have to know everybody,
Oh, repeat that
but
again.
because they know you and they when you're interfacing with the part of you that is connected, right? You're not engaging with the part of you that makes you human. There's a verse in I forget exactly which Odu, but this is an Ifa verse, and it says no, it's from Osameji. So Osameji is the Odu in which the divine feminine power manifests on earth, particularly that of what is called Iyami, right? So in Osameji, it says we must honor women because it is through the womb that we have become human. It's because we are born that we are human beings. Therefore, we must respect women because without womanhood, we cannot accomplish anything, right? So, um, when you are engaging with your ancestors, you are speaking and engaging with a part of you that is primordial. So that part of you that is divine and has experienced, that part of you that transcends your specific experience. Because each of us as human beings, we're not just ourselves. I like to think of an ancestral body, which encompasses the living members of a lineage, as, almost like a net or a web. And at each intersection, you have like a little diamond in the middle. And those little diamonds are your individual consciousnesses, and they are focal nodes of consciousness. Kind of like how in the brain we have neurons, and those neurons are connected. And then you have the synapses between each neuron. Those synapses would be equivalent to the spiritual connections that we have that bridge the gaps between us as individuals. But collectively, we have a brain. And so, in the sense of we as human beings, and including the spirits and consciousnesses of our ancestors, together, that is a larger body as well. And that is a collective consciousness that rivals the strength and divinity of any deity you can think of, because we are more together than we are separately. So, to that end, in terms of engaging with our ancestors without all the information, it is buried within us. So, we only have to follow the protocols of engagement, right? So, honoring our ancestors verbally, you know, um, I emphasize verbally because I know there's a lot of people who pray in their head, right? But there's power in the voice. And it's through expressing your energy that energy goes out into the world, right? If you are doing all the work inside your head, are you certain that it's left your head? You know, there's a reason why we speak our prayers out into the world. There's a reason why our words shift and alter the fabric of this reality. You know, our voices code the world. So, you know, you speak your prayers out loud. You call on them verbally in your language, in one of their languages, but you speak it out. If you have a tongue with which you can speak, you speak those words out into the universe. You call them verbally, affirm with confidence that they hear you, because they do. But you also want to elicit their attention. You want to bring it to the center, you know? If you're asking, let's say you have to ask me for something. If you whisper, I might very well hear you. I might also ignore you because I'm like, you should be asking me constantly. I don't want to play around. What is this? Oh, please, please. What is that? Versus, Baba Siete, I need 50 pounds. Okay, here you go. But I'm going to get annoyed if you ask me, like, please, sir. I want you to look at me at eye level. Because if you're not approaching me confidently, not only are you disrespecting yourself, but you're dishonoring the power with which you were given, you know? So you cannot have imposter syndrome with your own ancestors. And I'm saying that to the 8 of you that are also ancestral mediums in this audience that wonder if what you're experiencing is real. You cannot have imposter syndrome with your ancestors or with any divinity, any spirit. Imposter syndrome is not going to get you far in your spiritual development. You know, many of us have enemies as it is. Why are you going to be your own enemy? Why make it harder for yourself? The very least you can do is stand confidently to people who know who you are because you are part of them. So when you have to ask for something, you ask with conviction and with certainty. I hope I was able to satisfy that question.
I think you definitely answered that absolutely brilliantly. Yes. And so Kaz will take a question from the floor.
Demonstration. Thank you so much for I have a question because I feel like I entered the room just at the right time, as you mentioned, about the connection to the ancestors and I guess authenticity. Or not I guess, but authenticity is key. But for me, as I was actually entering the space, I was mentioning sometimes I struggle to identify with, say, more of the African identity of my ancestors. And I find in some spaces such as this, there is such a reverence that I appreciate, and yet for some reason I gravitate more towards what is called Sanatandana, which is a Hindu philosophy and tradition and culture. And then I feel slightly conflicted because I'm not sure the fact that I've been colonized to do so because of the popularity of these different traditions and Africa always being placed and dismissed at the bottom of, you know, the rank of everything, and yet there's so much power when they actually stolen. So one of my questions were is that what do you advise for understanding your ancestral calling and tradition when you are of mixed heritage? Because obviously coming to someone, not necessarily such as yourself, but I guess it depends upon the space that you're in, but often you're going to hear references to Ubuntu and certain African tribes that you should be calling to in certain phrases and names. And if it doesn't feel authentic to you, what do you do? Especially since you've been saying you should be making this calling with conviction and, really understanding how it is you're tapping into this connection with your ancestors. And then it's like, well, I kind of am, but I kind of don't really feel that that connects to me. Whereas when I do other practices and when I do other offerings and what is called fusion rituals, flower offerings and all these types of things, I feel it more when I'm focusing on a certain divinity. I feel it, and I feel it so intrinsically that I can't explain it, to the point where I would rather alienate myself and embrace it as opposed to a space that I may look the same as everybody else in some way, shape, or form, but if I'm not really being authentic, how then can I show up in the space? And I feel that's probably why I came a bit late, to be honest with you. And thinking, and this is what I mean. In regards to, I just have one more because I know that other people have questions.
Why don't we let Baba answer that one? Because it's
a loaded question.
Yeah, because I have quite a bit. I think the first part of your question is actually extremely appropriate. And I want to thank you also for the courage that it took for you to pose this question in such an environment. And thank you again for asking such an astute question. So I myself am of multiracial heritage, and part of that heritage is also from South India through my great-grandfather, right? So Saratam Dharma is also part of my ancestral heritage. And that ancestry is from Tamil Nadu, right? So, I don't see a conflict. I think one thing that we need to remember is that our ancestral traditions were not dogmatic in the sense that they required exclusivity in order to engage. Abrahamic religions require you to commit to them to the exclusion of any and everything else, right? I myself am also multiple, I don't have a specific singular spiritual path myself, right? And my destiny has required me to initiate into these traditions, which, as I said earlier, are all universes among themselves, to satisfy my varying ancestors, right, from all these different lineages. We as Black diasporans don't even come from one tribe. Not even just because of the thousands of years of migration on the continent before the transatlantic slave trade, but because, and particularly in the Caribbean and in North America, those who were enslaved were explicitly mixed with even other tribes that they may have been at war with, right? So, like, for instance, in Cuba, you have an instance where you have people of Congo descent, you have people of Yoruba descent, but in Africa, the Bakongo and the Nago were often at war. Oyo was an empire. Oyo is the empire that constituted part of what is now Yoruba land in Nigeria. Shango was an Alafin of Oyo. The particulars of that, we don't have time to go down that rabbit hole. But anyway, people got around, people moved around, people mixed, people integrated, people intersected. One thing that people are going to do when you put them in one place is have kids. So across all those thousands of years, of exactly that, migration, cultural exchange, genetic exchange, we are not coming from just one place. When we get a DNA test, it'll be 32% Nigeria, 17% Congo, 3% Sierra Leone, et cetera, and so on, right? So since we ourselves are not constituted from one single tribal relationship, our spiritual affinities are also likewise not so limited in that respect. So you having a practice of Sanatana Dharma, or what some people say is Hinduism, is not in conflict with the part of you that engages as an African descendant. And that's for multiple reasons, not just because there are Black Tamils who are Dravidian and Krishna is Black, and the very name Krishna means black, and so on and so on. Yeah, like it's not something that's in conflict. I don't see it as being in conflict. Our ancestors come from many different places, you know. Even if you didn't have Indian ancestry, you may have been led to that tradition. Hey, are we back?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
So I hope the last part of what I was saying was heard. How long were we out?
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh no, we got no. The next part. Yeah.
Remember when you work on that lead, the Krishna leading. Krishna's black.
Okay, so we got everything.
Yeah, we got everything. Yeah, we got everything.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yes.
It
Yeah,
felt
so
to a natural conclusion, I thought, with the answer. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. It was very, very rich.
Regards to the conflict, I mean, there is no
Oh, I do have one more thing to attach to the response.
Okay.
So what I want to say is also that when you are not familiar or have a embedded cultural context for engaging for instance, your ancestors, the connection might be a little shaky. That's something that you need to work at. Our cultures are, I want to say, conditioned towards the veneration of divinities. Our attention is socialized to fixate on a divinity, an external force, as the point of veneration. And that has its place. So I'm not telling people to avoid gods, right? But what I am saying is that we have power of our own. We are not helpless beings, and we have support that is human. So it may very well take a little more work for you to engage with your ancestral forces and build those relationships and hear what they're saying, or being able to interpret the messages that they're giving and not just get harassed by numbers all over the place. But that is work that is rewarding because it paves the way for so much of your own continuous development. So don't be alarmed or feel discouraged if it doesn't feel easy, if it doesn't feel the same way as when you pray to a divinity, or when you do puja, or when you are pouring libation at the crossroads, or when you're at the river singing to Oshun. Your ancestors, that's a completely different relationship. That's a completely different point of reference. And there's also the unique experience of you having to dig into yourself. So you also have to look at what you may be running from. It's easy to look outside of yourself because that's what our eyes do. But to look inward is very difficult. To look deeply within yourself, to have to face the pain and the trauma that our ancestors have gone through across all of these years is not easy. But can a God be traumatized? They don't carry those kind of human concerns or experiences, not the way that we do. And there is an intersection between an ancestor and divinity, because many divinities are also ancestors. But in the process of deification, like that process of deification, there are things that are shed, in order for them to become adapted to an experience that is less human. In becoming a cosmic entity, there are things that change, but it's important for there to be divinity at every step of the process. There has to be divinity at every stair on the stairway, right? So that somebody can lift you up as you lift them up, as you lift up someone else, because again, it's not a top-down experience, it's a circle, actually.
Yeah, fantastic. Really, really, really in-depth stuff. Really, really in-depth explanations. I'm so happy. And next question.
Thank you. As a beginner, kind of work, I've heard calling on the right. I've heard the concept of calling on the right ancestors, those that aid you rather than those that may have other intentions. So would you have any advice for how you would ask such a question so that you don't perhaps you having difficulty hearing?
Can you repeat the question, please? I can't really hear.
Yeah.
As a beginner of this kind of work, I've heard the concept of asking for the right kind of ancestors to come forward and help and aid you. So how would you go about perhaps looking for or asking questions so the right ones show up to help you? So perhaps those wounds that would have protected them, that in this life will not necessarily help you thrive, don't show up.
Okay, so I missed part of it, but the first part I do believe I heard correctly. So that was in engaging with one's ancestors, and I guess creating like a filter for who is able to assist. And then I lost after that part.
Yeah, it was a repetition, but yeah, basically that's the question. How can one engage the right ancestors to come and intercede on one's behalf or help?
Right. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier about verbalizing your prayers and how it's important to speak it out, you can also write a personal petition, right? And that would be the thing that you would recite as you are calling on them. So you would ask for ancestors that carry specific qualities, ancestors that, you be as specific as you can be. Like, I'm calling on those ancestors who did not cause generational harm. I'm calling on those ancestors who carried wisdom, who, were not abusers, who, et cetera, so on. So your words are creating a filter, so that it's blocking out those for whom the statement does not apply to, and inviting those who the statement does apply to. So asking for your elevated ancestors who are concerned with your highest good and the highest good of the lineage, being as specific as that is how you are creating a filter to be the arbiter of who passes through that membrane, if you will.
We've got another question coming.
Hiya, thanks for the presentation. Following on from his question, I was just wondering, earlier you were mentioning something about your ancestors having like limitations that you should first go to them, but sometimes they have limitations and that's when you'd go and ask other gods.
Mhm.
So what I want to know is like, how does one know what the limitations of their ancestors are? Like, how do you figure that part out? How do you know when to go elsewhere? Thanks.
Right. So I want to start by saying that our traditions are not intended to be solitary traditions, right? So these are community traditions where they function as an extension of a culture, right? So people are engaging in these traditions as communities and not as solitary practitioners. But due to a variety of different circumstances, you have a lot of people who are the person in their family who is being led or being called to engage with their ancestral traditions. And that's for better or worse, right? Um, but at the same time, we're not meant to engage in our traditions alone, right? So that's where community comes in. So you're not supposed to be engaging with these spiritual technologies without support, mentorship, guidance, elders, people for whom you can go to, even just to ask questions, right? So for me as a diviner, right, um, I use divination as an interface to be able to streamline solutions, so rather than have to do it the hard way and test every single potential outcome, I divine. The divination gives me the pathway to get to what I want, whatever I need to do to create the specific result, right? But that's something that I have because I'm part of the tradition, right? So for people who are not existing in African spiritual traditions, they have to wing it, right? Or find a community. Obviously, I'm encouraging you guys to, do the latter. I'm extending myself to all of you as a point of contact, right? I'm not obligating you to study under me or any of that, but I'm a source of a fair bit of knowledge that I'm willing to share, right? So reach out to me whenever you have a question, because I would rather answer your question and save you time, save you money, save you having to do it the hard way and figure it out on your own and maybe blow up your house. You know, and this also applies to any attempts at sorcery you guys may, end up, experimenting with. And that's why I mentioned blowing up your house, because, um, there's things that can do that. Everybody wants to put somebody in a jar, and then you're putting bleach and ammonia and vinegar and all this stuff, all these chemicals together, and you either chloroform yourself or um you know yeah, magical accidents, because somebody didn't take biology chemistry class, you know um yeah. So um you won't always have the answers, and that's why you're supposed to go to someone who has more answers than you do. I don't have all the answers, to my chagrin, but I don't. And this is probably the first and last time you'll hear a Leo say out loud in public that I don't have the answers and I don't know everything and I'm not always right. Okay, you guys file that away. But it's my job, since I care about the outcomes, and I care about being right in the future, right? And also about my own highest good. And I'm aware of how I have to do things for my highest good because that protects the people that I'm responsible for. So I can't afford to make dumb decisions. So I will go to my elders, who are people who are vetted, who are trusted, who have paved the way, who have done all the work and been succeed relationships with over time, to step up when I have to sit down, you know, to provide answers when I don't have them, you know. And there are occasions where I end up advising my elders about something because, you know, there's things that I've experienced or have had access to that they may not have had time to have access to, you know. Just the same way as you might be asking your grandmother for her recipe, for her oxtail recipe that you know she hid from everybody else and refuses to give, is the same way that you might help her understand her new iPhone that she wants to throw at the wall because she doesn't know how to FaceTime. There's a saying from Iwori Meji that the elder can reach the top shelf, but it is the small child's hand that can reach into the neck of the jar. So, you know, we need each other, you know, and we're not supposed to have these generational wars. You know, I don't like that. You know, I don't like how, you know, in the media, it's like we're constantly being pit against each other. Elders being pit against the youth. You know, the youth are made to feel helpless and useless and disempowered, and the elders are made to feel obsolete and useless. You know, we're supposed to work together to share what we know, to share our experiences, to share our power, our achievements for the betterment of the community. So community is the answer.
Thank you very much. Next question.
Anybody else?
Oh, yeah. Lady in the corner.
Hi everyone. Thank you for the talk. It's been really amazing
As loud as you can.
and interesting. So, could you talk a little bit more about healing intergenerational trauma from ancestral?
Mm-hmm.
Did you get that, Shlo?
Ooh, yes, yes. The questioner wants to know more about healing ancestral and intergenerational trauma. Where do we begin, right? Which is actually the real statement of where does one begin, you know, because this is something that spills over into our everyday lives, but it doesn't begin with us. You know, it begins at the very morning of the human experience, right? As long as people have been human, we've been fucking up, to be blunt. You know, and that has bubbled up and bubbled over and spilled over onto other generations, and we're all connected to each other through those common experiences. Where does one begin in terms of healing ancestral trauma? Well, there is no singular place. You have to do many different things at once. You have to take a look at yourself, and look at where you are personally, where you need help, you know, because everyone's trauma is different, right? So there is no like, oh, here is the formula for fixing unique individual issues that have compounded over thousands of years. You kind of have to like jump somewhere and then work with it as you can, you know, because where you are is very different than where the next person may be, you know. So where the ancestral work comes into it is where you are actively inviting your ancestors to share in the responsibility to lift up the family as a collective. You know, there's a lot of work that we do around feeding our ancestors or sharing nourishment with our ancestors or offering our ancestors light as a position, like as a sacrifice, an offering of light to literally enlighten or elevate those energies, to disperse stagnant energy, to work towards lightening the burden. In terms of what one can do most immediately, because there's a lot of things that have to be prescribed by divination. One of the things that you can do most immediately is to remove negative self-talk, to kill, to slaughter every bit of self-doubt, self-loathing, every instance of insecurity. Those are the things that you can do most immediately, to work on those things. And then as you can do more, then you start to look at, okay, what is my family's biggest issue? Is it alcoholism? Is it sexual trauma? Is it physical abuse? Is it economic struggles? Is it, health issues? Do we all have autoimmune disorders? What are the actual challenges of the family outside of oneself? And you start to chip away at what you can do individually. You try to enlist other members of your family to work towards that support. This may not require living relatives. Some people have families that are actively against any kind of growth. And you have to leave them where they're at. They might not be able to walk with you on the journey to healing when you're ready. That has to happen when they're ready. But you can do what you can do, and you can engage with your ancestors through prayer, asking them to do their share of the heavy lifting as well. Those are some of the things that you can do most immediately without having to engage divination. Because ultimately it's, they say if you take care of the pence, the pounds will take care of themselves. That's a phrase that someone just said to me recently. Unfortunately, it's a quote that's associated with Aleister Crowley, who I don't like. But, like they say, a broken clock is right twice a day. So, it's through creating momentum, consistency, that's how you'll see results. You can do a big, huge sacrifice and, sacrifice 50 cows and whatever. And that will still not have the same momentum as praying every day for years. You will be able to do far more through consistency than through elaborate displays of spiritual force.
Next question. Greeting. Give thanks to the interaction. Us all as we try to see the best way forward on this journey. But for I'm just, I'm thinking as you're speaking, as I'm hearing, and I want to know, why is it that we think that our ancestors can be the remedy for some of our traumas?
Why is it that we think that the ancestors have those answers when some of our ancestors were unable to overcome their trauma? Is it something about us going to that next stage of the journey that fulfills some of the healing? And then the second part, another question I wanted to ask was, can you share some joyous things that we can go to the ancestors with? So one was to, the first question was to, why is it that we are now caught in this void where we think our healing has to be, that we have to reach out to the ancestors? And I don't know, that's what's coming up for me.
Did you hear that?
Okay, so I feel like there are 4 different questions that have been folded
Maybe there
into.
are. Yeah, maybe. Well, answer it as you see.
I'm going to attempt to answer as much as I can within the space that we've been given. So, to the point about if having transitioned to the other side has awakened the capacity for being less toxic. Let's say like that. Is that a fair approximation of what the first question was?
Go with that, yeah. Work with that.
Okay, so death in and of itself doesn't wipe away a person's toxicity, right? However, we are not talking about an individual ancestor. We're talking about an ocean of experiences and everything that everyone has ever accomplished as a human being. So it's kind of like when you die, that veil that covered you when you were human, that filtered your experience so that you were not connected to that overall collective, has been removed. You still have a journey to go as an ancestral spirit. In fact, because people often ask about, well, this tradition speaks of reincarnation, this of ancestors, which one is right? Both of them are, because a spirit is also like you can how can I say this? You can use the analogy of an organism to relate to a spirit, right? So an organism is composed of organs. So the ancestral soul is a component of a complete spirit. And so when a person dies, the ancestral soul, which is a copy of the person's identity as a living human being in that particular life, then manifests as an ancestor. The consciousness or the ori of this person remains. That person, that being, exists across lifetimes and is not specifically identified as a person. Like, for instance, like I am Baba Siete. My ori has become me in this life, but is more than me and will be more than whatever other life it takes on, whatever other human it becomes across however many generations or whatever it will exist. At the end of its experience, it will return to source. But everything that I've accomplished, achieved, learned in this life will become Baba Siete, the ancestor, that I hope people, they're going to pour libation to me, pour libation with the good stuff. Yeah, but that ancestral soul is only one component of a spirit, and that ancestral soul retains my personality my experiences, my knowledge, and all the spiritual power that I've accrued through this lifetime. Once that soul is unencumbered by a body, there's no separation from it and all the other human souls of that ancestral lineage. So then there's a knowledge and experience sharing that happens, which is why you can address them as a collective. So the accomplishments of one person is far more limited than the accomplishments of 50 people, the collective growth of 1,000 people. So it's something that is also a matter of scale. I think I need the other part of the question, though.
Yeah, about the trauma, I think. Yeah.
So it's like ancestors are not perfect beings, right? They're not perfect beings. So in terms of limitations of experience, it's in the same way as you may have an elder that you love and respect, and they have an immense amount of wisdom, but they don't know everything, but they know more than you do, and they're accessible to you. And they may have a PhD in the field that you need information about. Are you going to ignore them because you might need to speak to Stephen Hawking about astrophysics? Or are you going to go to them to get your answer question because they're right for you?
Yeah, I hear you. It's just, I get it when you say that you have an ocean of experiences, so that when you come out of the physical, out of the body, then we become that bigger ocean. But like I am not the body in my living state, I am not this body. This body is the vehicle that I get into. So I still have that capacity to access all of that information now.
Yes.
Yeah. So it is
Mm-hmm.
interesting. I'm not going to go deeper into it, but just give us something that's joyous in terms of ancestral, connecting. You know, like something that doesn't takes us away from the trauma, because the way I see it is like my ancestors. I want to go and celebrate my ancestors. My ancestors, my vision.
Absolutely.
Forward. And my healing is the work that I'm doing now. Doing.
Absolutely.
Ancestrally, let us be able to have in our vision the joy that comes, so that it's not just. I think we got caught up, and I think our language is getting caught up in trauma, and so or all of the what is being put on us. So, so I just share something nice, please. Hold on.
So I do want to thank you for pointing out about ancestral joy, about celebrating the achievements, accomplishments of those who have gone before, of the love that is an actual tie and connection that brings us across all of these generations. So I do want to thank you for that. And the thing is also that when we're talking about trauma and the work that we have to do, this is probably the first time that we collectively have had attention paid to those circumstances in a way that has been directed towards being able to have the capacity to work through those issues and actually start to heal rather than living in survival mode, you know. So I know it can be exhausting, you know. Certainly I can relate to um feeling exhausted at the constant flow of specific conversations, you know. But I want to hold space for the fact that prior to, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, you know, most of us were not having these conversations about even celebrating our ancestors, let alone working at, you know, uplifting and moving forward in any other capacity as well, regarding moving forward as our ancestors. You know, so I don't think that these two things are in conflict. I think they are complementary, and I think they are both absolutely necessary. You know, I do think that it is that Black joy is important, that we have to celebrate ourselves, and that is exactly a point of growth and healing for ourselves. We, you know, at the very beginning of this talk, I was talking about how we have to erase negative self-talk, self-loathing, um, insecurities. All of that also ties into joy, because those are things that impede your capacity to love yourself, you know. And if you are not moving from a place of self-love, you are limiting yourself and you are being your own enemy, which then of course interferes with your capacity for joy, which then ties into exactly what you were talking about. So, you know, I do want to thank you again for highlighting those specific needs.
No, we've gone over time by 5 minutes. So, but what I am going to do is on the computer, I'm going to send everybody who's got tickets the email contact of Baba Siete. So for the first time in 100 years, he's coming to the UK in August. Yeah.
Yes, yes. It's been 372 years.
It feels like 100 years since we were in Paris together. So I'm just super excited, and I will put some things together so that we actually, after 2 years of seeing you via Zoom, we actually get to be in the same space again. So
Yes.
I make sure that everybody gets to know that you're coming. But yeah, we are over by 5 minutes, so, and we're going to be good. So thank you very much, everyone. But thank you so much, Baba.
Thank you so much, everyone. I look forward to seeing you guys in London.
Yes, 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 yeah, yeah. Absolutely spectacular. I learned so much today, and it's made so many things about my own ancestral veneration practice really make sense. And I've got to say thank you, because I've been trying to get in touch with my grandfather for so long, and listening to you, I realized he's been knocking. I just haven't really realized so many of the learnings have actually been coming through that connection. And today I've realized, oh, my grandfather really has been making those differences in my life. So thank you so much, Baba. And I can't wait for you to come in August. Can't wait, can't wait, can't wait.
Yes, it's only a few weeks, my goodness.
Yes, 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 yes. So thank you very much, everyone. Right. We'll see you in about an hour for the next one.
All right, bye-bye, everyone.
That was really good. Yeah. Yeah, Baba, that was on point. Yes, that was really, really, really good. Yeah. I'll be chatting to you in the next couple of days because you sparked some amazing things with this one today. So thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. Yes, and I want to thank all those
Oh,
who asked the
we can't
questions
hear
because
you. Who's put
thank thank you for everyone who asked
Oh, take
questions
out the
because those are
table.
amazing
Okay.
questions.
Oh, oh yeah. I think I can hear you now.
Yeah, I was saying thank you to everyone who asked questions because those are
Oh,
amazing questions.
they were amazing questions. Definitely, definitely, definitely. But I'm going to quickly get your contacts to everyone and I'll be in touch on Sunday.
Yes.
Okay. Love you lots. Can't wait to
All right,
see you.
awesome. Thank you so much.